Welcome to the Garden of Rose. My name is Cécile Masson. I'm the author of Rose, Letters of Love to Life. And I'm really happy to welcome today Eleanor O'Hanlon to the Garden of Rose. Welcome, Eleanor.
Hello, Cécile. It's lovely to be here. Thank you. Thank you for this invitation to enter the garden with you.
You're more than welcome, Eleanor. You are the writer of a beautiful book, which is called The Eyes of the Wild. And it's not very visible here. Yes, The Eyes of the Wild. And you are a field researcher and you've done lots of publication in magazines, and obviously you're working at the moment on a second book. Mm-hmm. So, as you know, The Garden of Rose is based on my own novel, Rose, Letters of Love to Life. Is there something that you would like to share about that? Because you've read my book as well.
I have, and I really enjoyed it, Cécile. It was a rare experience to read it, actually, because it's a book that allows you, that space, and you go, that's amazing. And first of all, it was the character of Rose herself. That there's something so beautiful about a person, that in that part of your life where you're holding your experiences in your heart and you're letting them reveal this essence, this sweetness, even through all the challenges and the pain that she's had. And there's something really, really beautiful about that to me. It touched me a lot. And then as I was reading, I would find certain phrases that they spoke to me very strongly. And the first one is one I've shared with you, which is she wrote about the scented labyrinth. I thought this was the most beautiful phrase. And the scented labyrinth was to be a garden that was particularly for the bees. And that would be so that sweetness of flowers, drawing in the bees and the other pollinators through their scent, through their gorgeousness, this invitation, come and taste my sweetness, and then which the bees take away and make the honey. And as I'm sure you know, the bee is one of the aspects of the divine feminine that is very, very ancient. So I love that phrase, the scented labyrinth. And it said something about the mystery of life, that we're drawn into this world of colors and scents and gorgeousness to experience it in its in its fullness. And so there was that phrase then, and then there was another one which towards the end, which I found absolutely amazing. And I'm just going to look at my notebook where I've got it written down, and that is the name of God is inventing itself in this moment, lost as quickly as it came. And so the flowing like a river, that the water is flowing and constant and changing, and the sound that is always changing, and yet again there's something constant in the flow of the water, that is the name of God coming through the world of nature. The nature that we apprehend and taste and touch and become more and more awake to and become more enlivened by is also a way into that deeper experience of the divine in the world, which has always been for me. I've always found the natural world to be a way into that sense of the presence of something beyond ourselves. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that, the depth with which and the attention with which you've read the novel. And as you know, in the structure of the garden that you're really part of and you are part of already is based on a title, which is Rose itself, that could be standing for respect, oneness, synchronicity and ecology, and Letters of Love to Life. So what is your take on these words, if you think about it in regards to your work and your life?
Yeah. This sense of respect, that's absolutely central to the reorientation that I think we need in our relationship with the other animals and with the natural world, which is arising through all the members of the natural community. You know, the natural world is this upbuilding and flowing and breaking down of energy and connectedness. And when you meet another person and you feel respected in yourself, that your dignity as a human person is something that is recognized, then you can actually give them something beautiful from yourself. You know, we've all had that experience of, maybe rare, but it's so valuable that another person has truly seen and respected your essential nature, and they give you an enormous opportunity then to give that back. And I feel that if we give this respect to the other creatures for who they truly are, then they will give that back to us. And there'll be an unfolding of a new relationship that is more beautiful than any one that we've had before. And in my own encounters, some of which have been very, very, very intimate, very, very expansive, very close as well, sometimes physically with large animals who have, at their invitation, I've been given this sense that they see me as a human being and they give me that respect. And they are willing to engage with me. And when I give that back, and I don't go into their space in a disrespectful way, then there's this beautiful communication opening up. And I've described a number of those encounters in the book and in other articles, where the respect that I feel has deepened into and become an amazing sense of communion with the essence beyond the form of that particular animal or that being in animal form.
And when you meet that animal, that being, it's not just the individual, isn't it? It's the whole history of the animal and the whole family of the animals, because I had the joy to be part of some of your program as well. And it resonates, not just the individual has its own character, like we have our own characters.
Yes.
It's also about their whole lineage, and it's about their whole family system and community. So it's really about respecting the animal and the community behind and the lineage behind.
Exactly. You give them the dignity they have as an individual being with their own personhood. You know, there is in many traditional societies, there is this idea of other than human personhood, or a recognition of a focus of individual consciousness that is there in, for example, the great whales, or in the elephants that I've encountered, in the wolves and the bears. So they have their experiences of life, sometimes wounding experiences of life, which is why we must be careful to respect their space. And there is also the wider field of consciousness, which is the whole species. And indigenous cultures then speak of that wider field as the larger animal soul, in their community of the soul, in which each individual is participating. And so when you have a deep encounter with another animal, no matter, you know, it can be, you know, occasionally you can really feel the presence in a bird, for example, that's watching you. And there's that moment when it isn't just one bird, it's actually expanding into the field that that particular individual is occupying. It's the other birds, and then the interconnected nature of the web of that bird's awareness, and you're able to access that through them. They've opened that up for you, this wider field.
Yeah, so it really is about how we are aware of the existing relationships, isn't it? Because there is no life without relationships.
Yeah,
Always
exactly.
that interconnectedness, be that visible and invisible. At the moment, there's a lot of research being done about the interconnectedness of the tree families with the wood systems, etc. But it's the same thing with animals. You're a specialist in the wild animals.
It's so wonderful, and I think we need to do we need to re-examine some of the popular conceptions that we've been given, that the relationships in animal communities are based on competition. They're based on eating, being eaten, and unfortunately that is a part of a certain aspect of popular culture. The field of relationships is far greater than that. And just to give you one example, when I've been with elephants in Africa, particularly in a region called the Okavango Delta, which is one of the really great refuges for the African elephant. That region and the whole of northern Botswana is home to 1/3 of the world's remaining savanna elephants. And you watch them eating, right? Now, an elephant who's eating is doing so in a rhythmic, peaceful, very secure way. It's almost meditative, and you can sit there and respecting their space, a courtesy which they will extend to you, and you're drawn into this very peaceful transformation of which is going on for something like 15 hours a day, right? So an elephant is spending a great deal of his or her life actually feeding, but through that they are actually involved in a transformation of the whether they're eating grasses or they're eating branches, they're eating leaves, they're doing a transformation of the ecology that is benefiting untold numbers of other creatures, because what passes through them and becomes this dung bolus is containing so many nutrients, so many seeds of other plants, that it is actually renewing the life of that particular part of the bush. The seeds will be transported by the termites or the dung beetles. They will travel great distances. The areas that they've opened up in will actually regenerate more quickly. They are architects of a living landscape, architects simply by who they are and what they do. And when you're in their presence, you feel that, and that's their dignity. And so you feel this deep respect for what it is to be an elephant and to have that dignity of being part of the creation of a living ecology.
As you speak, I'm being drawn into this space. It's like you're in a meditative space just now. Because you've been so close to the wildness, so close to these wild, great creatures. You seem to animate that as well. Like it's really coming from you, and like you are the voice of what the messages you got from them, that you need to bring them into wherever you are. And at the moment, the Garden of Rose, it's absolutely so I'm really honored to have you in this space, Eleanor.
Oh, bless you, Cécile. Well, I told you that a garden has these wild edges, the wild places where the grass grows very, very long. And you have lots of little nested places and burrows for different creatures, where the hedgehogs can hide, and there's thick patches of bushes for the birds, and then right at the edge, maybe where the wild boar are coming in at night, or the deer are stepping very, very delicately along those paths. And those are the wild edges that are part of the garden, and they lead out and out and out beyond that into the wider nature, which is sustaining the garden, because no garden is separate.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
So we can put hedges around it, but it's all one, isn't it?
It is exactly. And, you know, and if you look at the planetary ecology, we have all these, you know, we have these different areas, different zones, different ecologies, whose, I mean, are not bounded in the way that we understand through human borders, but nevertheless have edges where one meets another, liminal, we call them liminal areas, and they're often among the richest ecologically, because where you have where two different types of ecologies meet, there's a process of transformation going on. You know, one very beautiful example are mangrove swamps that you'll find on coastal areas, which are very, very important habitats for spawning fish, and which are also areas of that protect the fabric of a coastal zone against tidal surges, storms, all these things. So these edges and these border areas are very, very important in nature. And I think what I'd like to bring to the Garden of Rose is that wild edge where the human and the natural, wider natural world can meet in a beautiful and creative and fertile way. Yeah.
And we are part of nature, aren't we? So if you allow me, I would just like to read just a small quote of Rose. Let's
Please do. Yeah, please do.
She's, most people are not being taught at school how interconnected everything is outside of our own existence, but also just as much inside our own body. They are not being taught that we are ourselves an ecosystem. And listening to you, Eleanor, I feel that your ecosystem resonates so deeply with the ecosystem of the places you had the joy of traveling, which is, you know, the cold Siberian steppes and also the warmth of Africa and many other places you haven't mentioned yet. But you seem to have really integrated them in your own ecosystem somehow. Is there something you could share about how you perceive that? How?
Yeah, that's a really wonderful question. Thank you. It's something that has changed over the years. It's changed over time. You know, I have a very strong sense of friendship with the natural world. If I were to, I mean, there's wonder and there's awe, there's deep respect, as we spoke about before. And there's also a very powerful sense of friendship. And that I have felt this love and friendship flowing back to me from the beings of nature. And that's what's allowed me to integrate some of the places where the energies, the actual energies of are very, very potent. And one example I'd like to give of that is I've traveled quite, as you mentioned, a number of times in the Russian Arctic, northern Siberia, up to the edges of the ice pack. And there you're, you know, you're at the edge really of this very potent play of light and dark, and when the light comes, it arrives in a steady uninterrupted 24-hour stream for, depending how far north you are, maybe 3 months of the year, maybe 2 months of the year. And so your body is entering a zone, you know, into which you were not born, right? So you're having to make certain energetic adjustments yourself in order to feel relatively comfortable there. And in a sense, that's like any other relationship, that when you meet another human who you're drawn to, there's this time of discovery, of learning how your energies are going to come into a coherent and lovely dance of the imagination, of desire, of creativity, whether it's a man or a woman. There's what are they awake? What is this person awakening in you when you meet them? And that is something that is you don't want to rush that. And so when I've entered some of these places where there are very powerful natural currents at work, it feels like developing a relationship of love and friendship. And perhaps one of the most strong examples of that is having been, although I'm somebody who's very at home in the north, far more so, and Africa was new to me in some ways. But having spent several weeks on foot in the bush in the Okavango Delta with Kalahari, our Kalahari friends, tribe people of the Baye Bushman people, and also our South African friends who are professional safari guides. We were camping and canoeing together. Over that time where your normal mental activity is, you can put it away, you don't need it, you don't need to think or discuss. In fact, we often spoke very little, but your senses are engaged in a new and much more immediate way to receive the richness of your surroundings. And that means you drop into this state that's very alert and very open, but also very peaceful. And we came to a point, now we were on foot in the bush, and if anybody who's ever traveled to Africa knows, the animals are usually far more wary of humans on foot than humans who are in a vehicle. They're, the lions will come right down by your Jeep and go to sleep there. They know they don't need to worry. But a human on foot, that's a different thing. And usually they'll tell you, oh, well, if you're on foot in the bush, you won't get very close to the animals, but you'll see lots of tracks and signs and scat and so on. Well, that's not what happened. After we had spent some time walking and coming into this coherence, and that was very peaceful, the animals weren't running away from us anymore. In fact, we had this moment where we realized that there are small antelope species called the impala. They're very common in southern Africa, and a larger antelope called the kudu. And they were just accepting our presence as we were walking and not moving away, which is what they'd done at the beginning. And our guide mentioned this and said, have you noticed that they're not moving away from us? I went, wow, because the animals are so attuned energetically to what a human brings into their space, right? They know immediately. And the most stunning example of this was when we were voluntarily approached by a group of 4 elephants who, seeing us, we were standing on a termite mound at the time, rumbled and walked straight towards us. Like, I wasn't moving towards the elephants. I would never do that. I would never approach a wild animal, ever, of my own volition. But they chose to approach us. And when I say 4, I mean 2 large adults, a female, a much larger male, and the female's 2 youngsters at her side. They made that choice to come towards us, to stand right in front of us, to give us this greeting, this presence, and then to walk off, leaving us I don't really have words to describe what that was like, except that my mind was not present at all. And I was they'd opened up that space that we were speaking of quite consciously, quite deliberately, that space of deep respect, and said, feel who we are. Feel who we really are. And bring that to others if you can. I'm putting words on a sense that I was given, but I made a promise at that point that I would be a witness to who they really are. I'm giving the elephants as one example because they are really the elders, I would say, for the life of the bush in many ways. They're holding a very potent field of consciousness that includes many other creatures, not only at the physical level, but also at the level of social relationships, emotional bonds, and ultimately the spiritual field of coherence. Elephants are a very potent and very, very important anchor for that. Which is why when we destroy their societies and their social bonds and the relationships of the younger elephants with the elders, we are disturbing something at a very deep level, and it's not good. Yeah.
No, certainly it isn't. That's a fact, and that's the least we can say about that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Eleanor, you've written a beautiful book about your experience. Would you like to read something about it? An extract from your book, or would you like to talk about the program that you've developed based on the book? What would you like to do?
Yeah, I'd love to do that. I'd just like to share the screen and bring up one image, which will go with the reading. So what you're seeing here, Cécile, is a photo of the eye of a great whale called the grey whale. And you can see the, even, you know, as humans, we can still read the expressiveness in the eyes of a great whale. However separate we may seem to be from an evolutionary point of view, there we have the immediacy of connection with whales, I would say, through our ancestral wisdom. This particular whale is one that I first encountered up in the Russian Arctic, where they go to feed during the summer and autumn period. They feed on the ocean, from the ocean floor, on small shellfish. So they dive down, scoop up through the bottom, and then they eat the shellfish in the bottom levels of relatively shallow coastal areas. I first met this whale in the Bering Strait, and where I was with indigenous people. And that is where they go during a certain period of the year, and then they return following the entire coast of North America, right down to the Pacific coast of Mexico, where there are a series of protected lagoons where they go to meet one another, to mate with one another, and to give birth to their babies. So these lagoons are sheltered places where they can safely raise their young for the first month or two of their lives. And then the young baby will follow the mother on that great journey north again, up into the Arctic seas. So this wonderful creature is flowing through the cycle of the year, from fasting to feeding, from mating to birthing, from one temperate sea up into the very cold Arctic waters. It's one of the largest migrations of any animal. And this whale, during two periods in its in their relationship with human beings, have been brought to the very edge of extinction. We're extremely lucky that the grey whale has survived. First of all, during the 1800s, when whalers found those protected lagoons, and they went in their whaling boats and they separated the mothers from the calves, and they slaughtered them. But in those same lagoons now, the grey whales are greeting people in the most open and beautiful manner. And so these whales who have experienced really some of the worst of aspects of human nature are also opening up to us this renewal of a beautiful connection with nature. And it is at their invitation. And so I'd like to read a short passage from the meeting that I had with a grey whale mother and her baby in that one of the Mexican lagoons called San Ignacio.
So it's from your
from Eyes of the
Wild, the Book of Whales.
Yeah. So this is actually the opening chapter. The whale mother and her baby flow over and under and around each other. They circle the boat in long, graceful turns, sink and rise again, with the water sparkling on their wet sides like stars. At times, the mother turns through the water in a slow, powerful rotation from her belly to her back. Sometimes the boat rocks as she pushes it with her head from underneath. Yet I never have a moment's fear of her great size and her power. She moves with completely refined, sensitive awareness through the whole of her body. When the mother comes to the surface next, she is close enough for me to reach out and touch her. I run my hands along the skin of her side, which feels indescribably smooth, as though the texture has been endlessly refined by the washing of the sea. Her flesh is firm and cool beneath my hands. Through the physical contact with her body, a sense of the expansive dimensions of her being opens inside me, soundings from some vast interior sea. As the depth of the meeting grows, it becomes an opening through which something entirely new is pouring, a wordless sense of connection with a greater life. The whale gazes up at me through the water. When I look down into her dark eye ringed with folds of skin, I meet the lucid and tranquil gaze of an ancestor, one of the ancient ones of the earth. And I feel her taking me out, far out, of thought and linear time, beyond the limited concerns of my ordinary mind, into a profound sense of meeting with another being whose consciousness is not separate from my own. And so afterwards, I wrote, Eden is not simply a mythical place or a metaphor for original innocence or an outworn and divisive religious symbol. No, Eden is a state of being, and we are free to return there every time we know ourselves again in this deep communion with the rest of life. And we speak of Eden as a garden, the garden of life's beauty and diversity and uncontainable creativity. And so
Thanks so much, Eleanor, to bring this into this conversation, and based on your profound experience of what you've just shared and all the other things that you do, you have also created a program that you would like to share with more people. Just can you just touch a little bit on what you would like to offer in the context of the Garden of Rose? Or
Yes, I think the first thing I'd like to bring to people is to open up that possibility of a deeper friendship with nature, with the natural world, to realize that there is this amazing willingness on the part of all the beings of nature to help and support humanity. And we've forgotten this. We have really forgotten this. And one of the barriers now that we've is our sense of guilt. We know how badly we have abused the planet, and we bear that burden of guilt. And yet, as I've just read, nature immediately welcomes us back. So the program, which would run in different modules, the first one are the teachings from the animal powers. I use the word power in the sense of the living consciousness of the animals. And this idea of animals as teachers to a deeper relationship with life is a very ancient one. It's part of the development of the human mind and human culture over tens of thousands of years. So there would be a weekly teaching and storytelling, using imagery, using the experiences that I've been given of connectedness to bring people into the awareness of that possibility for making deep friendship with nature, and to receive, even if we've never met ourselves in physical form, a whale or an elephant or a lion, or we can still find a way to be given what they have to teach through our imagination, through our consciousness. And the program combines that with nature connection practices for everyday life to awaken our animal body, our animal senses, our animal awareness, which are difficult to maintain in a very digital world. And so giving that guidance so that when you go out into your own garden, you know how you have been given some guidance and how your hearing can become more acute. You can smell with more immediacy and intensity. You can open out your field of vision so that you're seeing more as an animal sees. And that means that your mind gets a rest, which is a very important way of coming home to yourself. So that will be launching again in March. We've run one module at the end of last year, and we'll start again in around the equinox for March. And I'm going to be putting up the program on my website in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, and we'll publish that in the Garden of Rose as well, of course.
Yeah.
And your program is called Reawakening the Animal Senses, is that correct?
Overall, the overall title is The Spirit of Nature Connection.
Spirit of Nature Connection. And there are 3 models, and
yeah,
the first one would be really reconnecting with the body,
with our animal nature, our animal vitality, and that vibrancy of our animal nature, which is something that we have as children. It's just completely natural to us. So it's helping people to restore that and bring that deep sense of enjoyment as well, the pleasure of being in your animal body, which often gives me a strong desire to growl.
Yeah. Beautiful. I very much look forward to this program. And Eleanor, again, thank you so much for being part of the Garden of Rose and for this conversation.
Thank you, Cécile.
You're more than welcome.